Hey everyone, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here. Kind of funky.
Kind of funky.
Kind of funky. So welcome to That Pedal Show. We're going to be talking about funk guitar today, as best we can. You wanted to get into this. Before all of that, please go to thatpedalshowstore.com and check out our range of merch and things like that. It's the primary way we fund this show, and we are extremely grateful for those of you who buy merch.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. Yes, there's been...
Are you enjoying my 50 cycle hum, Dan?
I'm enjoying your amplifier very much, I must say.
We will explain that in a minute, and we must not forget Noel's knobs.
Can't forget Noel's knobs.
I wonder what the settings are.
Okay, there's been a resurgence of late of the funk, and it occurred to me that this is something that's cyclical, that has happened ever since the late 60s, and there's periods of funk end up coming back, and it happened again in the 80s, and it happened again.
It is quite hilarious. The older you get, the more you see things coming around.
Yeah.
But being repackaged too, right?
Absolutely. So we've, if we think about sort of the start, James Brown, and then going into, the big 70s funk bands, Average White Band, Tower of Power, then that moves sort of into the 80s, and you've got, late 70s, and you've got Chic and Earth, Wind and Fire and disco funk. And then going into the 90s, the brand new heavies and all, and it's sort of been, it was such a movement when it first happened because it offered something new. There was a different sort of energy about it, especially when you think of James Brown and what he brought to the party.
Come back to that in a second. So what we're going to cover today, what is funk, is the first question. The second thing is, what is the role of guitar in funk? The third thing will be, what about some chords? We don't normally do this on That Pedal Show, but we'll just show you some chords that might get you going if you're not au fait with this style of playing, and that will certainly ring some familiar bells for you in songs you've heard down the years. We'll then talk about some sounds. We have unnecessarily complicated pedal boards here. It doesn't need to be this, by the way. These are just some examples we'll go through. And then we'll finish off by talking about maybe some ideas. If there's two of you in the band, what you can do to complement each other if you're playing funky type music.
Okay, so what is funk?
Mid-60s.
Yes.
It's largely credited to James Brown and James Brown's band. Now, as with all things, doubtless there were all these kinds of things going on at the same time, but James Brown is widely regarded as changing the beat in music from an emphasis on the 2 and the 4, right? And if you listen to most pop music and soul music, that's what it is. Funk was all about the 1. And if you listen to any George Clinton Parliament Funkadelic, they sing about the 1 all day long.
Yep.
And it's all about emphasising that first beat of the bar. And if you listen, it's almost comedic. Listen to Up for the Downstroke by Parliament. And they come back every time and emphasise that one like there is no tomorrow.
Right.
And James Brown's band is sort of, Google it for the full story, but credited with that significant shift in rhythmic feel.
Sure.
And for me, that's what it's about. And then if you listen to bands like, I've written some down, Brothers Johnson, James Brown, obviously, Earth, Wind and Fire, The Meters, some Stevie Wonder stuff, Kool and the Gang, even dear old Cameo that we were listening to this morning.
Temptations. There's freaking loads of them. And there was such a massive movement at that time that if you didn't have an element of funk in what you're doing, it was, But
I would definitely start with the funkier end of James Brown rather than the soulier end. Parliament P-Funk, Funkadelic. I'm never quite sure how that worked, but anyway, about 12 people on stage making an awesome racket.
Yeah.
And the Meters, would be something I would look to.
Yeah. And I would say Tower of Power.
Yeah.
Average White Band.
It's developed by the time we get there, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. So the role of guitar in funk then, Dan?
So the role of the guitar is closer to a conga than a keyboard in funk music, right? It's a percussion instrument. And so much of guitar in funk music isn't even played. It's that.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it was that Al McKay from Earth, Wind and Fire said that he would create the pocket with his groove.
Interesting.
And everyone would follow him. And they wrote songs like that.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And there's a lot of, a lot of funk music there's no keys in. They'll have two guitar players, but no keys.
Yeah.
Because of that percussive nature of the guitar.
I think it's about that, isn't it? If you're playing long sustaining chords and wide open voices in the chords, that's probably becoming something that happens after classic funk.
Right.
If it's classic funk, it's stabby, it's small chords, and by small chords, you don't play a whole extension of a chord. You play a...
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was quite the term chicken scratching was coined by Jimmy Nolan.
Okay.
Who
James Brown's
guitar player, and that he listened to his pocket. It's quite extraordinary, but there was sort of like chicken scratching. Yeah. It's like cool, great.
So syncopated tends to come off the 16th feel in the note. We'll just share. So before we get into some chords, I want to share something that Corey Wong said. It was in a video for Guitarist magazine.
Yep.
Try this. If you've got a metronome, should we just do it quickly?
Yeah, sure.
So here's a way to get your head around, before we get into chords, here's a way to get your head around some of the feel and some of the time and improving your time.
Let me just get my metronome.
So we're going to start with the metronome set to 120.
Here you go.
I should be able to hear the 16s in that fairly easy because I've got targets on every beat. And this is straight out of Corey Wong. This is not me saying this, right? I hope you can hear the metronome. Maybe turn it up a little bit, Dan. Fairly easy because you've got targets. We're going to half that metronome speed to 60.
Excuse you.
I can't actually hear the metronome.
Sorry.
But so you've now got half as many targets, right? Practice that. Then you reduce it to 30. And now we've basically got one metronome beat. That's nice.
It's great.
It does sound like an interesting morning. Now we've only got one metronome beat per bar.
Okay, ready?
Oh.
Nice.
Well,
Yeah, that's great.
and by doing that, it's one way that you can really help to lock your own. Dan used the term pocket earlier, and it's no coincidence that Scary Pockets exists. The amazing collective of people that play funky music, among other things, that develops your own pocket. And it's just a really good way to get your head around starting to think about 16th note divisions, rhythms, which is kind of where funk guitar springs from, would you say is fair?
Yeah. If you think about what happened with the drums going into funk, where that soul thing from eighth notes, and then it went, you know, that started the 16ths in there.
Yeah.
And so it's only natural that the percussive element of the funk guitar would follow that.
Fill it in.
Yeah.
And then just finally on that, obviously, if you just hold down a chord and play 16ths, so we use damping on and off.
Yeah.
This hand is absolutely crucial for the damping.
Absolutely. The last thing I'm going to say on that.
Thin pick.
Yeah. So if you've never done this before, and you use a thick pick, it's like the gypsy jazz players. If you're so used to, playing with, supreme control over your.
What's that like?
Yeah. But if you watch the funk players, their right hand is so relaxed, and so much of that muting is coming from the left hand. Now,
A lot of it's from the wrist and not from the arm.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, if this is something new to you, try a really thin pick,
Well, cool.
because you don't get the same.
Immediately sounds better.
Yeah. Well, you don't get that resistance
Yeah.
that you do with a thick pick, and you just get. You just get that. It's all about the rhythm in the right hand. You're not constant. You don't have to worry about having to force the pick through the strings, and then you can just.
I'm going to try that as the video goes along.
Yeah.
Okay, so having talked a little bit about the basics, let's give you some chords to play if you don't know these already. What's your favourite funk chord, Dan?
A dominant 9 chord. So, let's have a look at E. If you take the first 3 notes of an E7, which would be those 3 notes there, which is the 1, the major third, the minor 7, and then with this finger here, we're going to bar the notes underneath. That gives us our 9.
Chord diagram on screen, obviously.
And what happened with the funk players, especially Jimmy Nolan, they
I'm
started.
going to say one person owns this chord.
Yeah. And they started using extensions. So what happened was, instead of just hearing, which we were hearing a lot up to that time, we started hearing. And so using these upper extensions of the chord, and that's just, all these notes here are fair game. So that's a really fantastic, it's used in like funk everywhere.
It's the Sex Machine chord.
Yeah.
1 fret down.
Very nice.
Better not play. Try not to play too much of it in case we get picked up for copyright. But it's an ultimately essential chord for funk guitar playing.
Yeah.
Dominant 9.
Yeah. So much of that is based around, because it all comes from blues.
Yeah.
Right. And those 1-4-5 progressions are still all based around dominant 7 chords.
Should have said that at the beginning. Blues, soul, and jazz comes together
Yeah.
and makes funk. That's basically what happens. But okay, I'm just going to go with a minor 7.
Nice.
Right.
Yep. I automatically know what song that is.
What do we want to play when you hear an E minor 7? Right. Chord diagram on the screen. It's good times.
Yeah.
All right, so really important E minor 7, and a very simple chord to get going on. I just need to check my notes. It's also I think it might be the car wash chord as well,
Okay.
but played. Oh no, that would be a major 7, wouldn't it?
So yeah, so that dominant 7. And that's also Cut the Cake.
Yeah. A dominant 7 shape on the top 3 strings, again, chord diagram up.
Yeah.
Right, let's move on. Let's get a bit more interesting. I always think of this as the Hendrix chord, the 7#9 chord. Most of us know it in E because it will be Hendrixy and Stevie Ray Vaughan-y. Dan told me an interesting fact that I don't understand about this chord earlier this morning, which is...
dominant 7#9 chord has a major 3rd and a minor 3rd in it. So it's got the 1, the minor 7, major 3rd here, and a minor 3rd here. So lots of dissonance.
And then, so if I play it here... yeah, if I play it here, I think it's here. It's the Pick Up the Pieces chord.
Yeah.
It's also the flashlight chord.
Flashlight.
You hear it in... I wrote some other things down. Oh, it's also the basis of coming forward into the sort of rock funk era. I'll be amazed if I don't get picked up for that, if you
Right.
have to ask by the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
But it's the top of the chord, right? Remember what we said earlier about it's quite rare that you're going to play a whole extended chord across all 6 strings.
Yeah.
So that chord would be here. But I'm actually only playing the top 2 notes and then extending it. Frusciante is brilliant, funky best in my opinion. Okay, you tell me if this is right, Dan. B flat minor 13. So one of the he explained it earlier. You do that extension as we heard in the Sex Machine chord. Now, what was I listening to? The Payback by James Brown.
Yes. Yeah.
And it just comes in so hard on that riff.
You can hear why, because of the percussive nature of the guitar, but also the way that those extended harmonies stick out.
Yeah.
It's why it works so well in funk.
Unbelievable tension and release.
Yeah.
Now, apologies if I didn't get the rhythm quite right. And the other thing about that song, we'll come on to tone in a sec, is trebly, trebly, trebly.
And okay, why is that? Think about the role of the drums and bass in funk, and think about the role of the horn section. You know, how many piece horn section did James Brown tour with? I guess as little as he could get away with.
I was lucky enough to see him later on in his career in London, and there was countless people on stage, all in red suits.
Right, amazing. But having a horn section like that is a wall of sound.
Yeah.
And one of the things that trebly guitar sound, one of the happy accidents is that guitar players, especially in the day, the amps that they were using would have struggled to be heard with a horn section like that.
Yeah.
You turn down the bass and the amplifier isn't trying to amplify the bass. It's a lot easier for the amplifier to amplify high frequencies. The only way for them to be heard is turn the bottom end down so the amplifier can work on just getting them to be heard.
Yeah. And
you've got this scratchy, percussive thing
Yeah.
that sort of sticks out the front.
Listen to that. Listen to the Payback by James Brown. Listen to Sissy Strut by the Meters, and just how trebly and reverby that guitar is. If you heard it in isolation, as happens with a lot of recorded guitar sounds for what it's worth, you go, wow, I would not choose that. I would put more bass in, I would make it whatever.
Nice.
But that's what did it. Okay, so to recap then, here's some chords for you to try. We've got, I need this because otherwise I won't remember. We'll put them up on screen now, so you've got it on one screen. A simple minor 7, a 9 chord, 7 sharp 9, a minor 13. Just as 4 examples to get you going.
Beautiful.
The other thing just to say, and the 9 chord was what I was playing over when Dan and I had the little jam at the beginning. Just straight that with a semitone embellishment. What Dan was doing was the other thing that happens in funk guitar, which was the sort of broadly pentatonic single string riff.
Yeah.
Give us an example of something like that.
So let's say that the chords are B minor to E7, right? So a lot of people would play B minor here to an E here. In a funky context, we're looking at
that's
this
where I would go.
to this, right? But very rarely you'd play those whole extensions, right?
Yeah.
You'd be
Louder.
now, as a single note thing, all I want to do is accentuate the notes that are in those chords. So instead of going, I'm going to go. And so if you just do a B minor to E,
Yeah, a great example. Well, you can hear it all through James Brown's stuff, and you can hear it, pick up the pieces that we played earlier, that.
and it's amazing how because these parts, they don't just jam. These are worked out. Have listened to Cut the Cake by Average White Band, and you hear the syncopation between the two guitars.
Yeah.
It really is something remarkable. And even though a lot of funk, the changes generally can be pretty simple. Like, there are loads of James Brown tunes that are just one chord all the way through. The magic happens with the rhythm and with the syncopation of that interplay and tension that happens.
Call and response.
Exactly.
Well, we'll try and demonstrate some of that at the end. Right, sounds then. So what is funk? Some things to play. What about tone?
Yeah.
Why have you chosen, we'll come to the pedal board in a minute, why have you chosen this and that, Dan?
I've chosen this because 65, around when it was all kicking off, and literally for no other reason. The guitar tones in funk, especially the early days, when we think of funk, a lot of us think of strats.
I'm deliberately not playing a Strat for
Yeah.
that reason. You will hear a Strat in a minute, but for that absolute reason, it was so often 2 humbucker Gibsons, or all kinds of different guitars, P90s, 175 with P90s.
175, yeah. Bruce Conti was playing a Les Paul, Bruce Conti with Tower of Power fame, and he had one of the best funk guitar sounds. You can do it with anything.
Yeah. That's the thing to say. You don't have to just gallop straight for the Strat, the position 2 and the compressor, although we will hear a bit of that before the end of the show. I think what Dan has got here, a Fender, something derived from a Fender black panel amp, reverb, the mid position on a Fender Tele.
Hard to go past.
Can we just hear that? No pedals, nothing. Fender Tele mid position, Fender amp with reverb, and we will do Noel's knobs.
I wonder what the settings are.
Extended top end, a bit of quack because it's the middle position.
Yeah.
It's the sound of ages.
Yeah, it really is.
Now, if you just go under the bridge pickup, you might well hear this too, or the middle position with less bass, but you're equally likely to hear this.
Just a bit thinner, a bit pokier.
Yeah, it would stand out a bit more. I actually think what you're more likely to be hearing is the middle position on a dual humbucker guitar with loads and loads of treble dialed in the amp, which is kind of what I've got going on here. So slightly different take on the amp. It's a Fender Bassman 70 from 1979, so a bit later. But the reason I've chosen this amp, here's Noel's knobs,
I wonder what the settings are.
is because it's got gobs of headroom.
Yeah.
There can be a bit of a mistake in funk guitar to think it's got to be ultra linear, ultra clean, and we will talk a little bit about that in a minute via direct sounds. But actually, if you listen to some of those early Meters recordings, James Brown, there's a bit of hair on that guitar.
Yeah.
So it's probably a deluxe reverb or something similar, or an Ampeg, or whatever they would have had in the studio at that time.
And you've got to remember, they're all in the studio together. And that guitar player, because his role is so important and he needs to be heard over the horn section.
So it's just, we'll come to the pedal boards in a minute, but forget the pedal board. This is guitar into amp, right? Gobs of treble,
Yeah.
gobs of punch, no compressor. The only compressor you would have been hearing on those early recordings is the amp giving up a bit and whatever the recording signal was. Pedal compressors, it would have been a nice recording chain and the natural compression you get.
Yeah. But
from
that bit of hair there.
tiny
from the
bit,
amp,
yeah. I mean,
just
this
the
is
amp.
crazy high headroom amp.
Yeah, exactly. But with the humbuckers and you know the amp turned up, it's giving a bit of love. You know?
And that
sounds killer.
was everything up to 10 middle position on a dual humbucker guitar. And remember, in the mid 60s, these were the serious guitars.
Yeah, absolutely.
Serious guitar players, serious session musicians would be playing these kinds of guitars.
Yeah.
Not necessarily those kinds of guitars.
Yeah.
Took a bit of a while for that to kick in. I've also got, because this amp doesn't have reverb, it is actually hitting a Surfy Bear reverb tank, but take that as read. Consider that as a reverb that would be in the amp.
Sure.
But it's quite important. I mean, I'll try not to play too much of it, but I'm just going to turn the reverb up because obviously we need more reverb. If we don't get picked up for copyright here, I'll be amazed.
Yeah, there's loads of it on that recording.
Might well be too much, and it was really super drippy on the original. It was Sissy Strap by the Meters. It was kind of drippier. It was the definition of drippy reverb for me, but plenty of reverb.
Yeah.
Flipping love that sound.
Yeah, amazing.
What effects should we talk about then, Daniel?
So we have to talk about filters. Filters being Autowahs, wah pedals, and I'm also going to include phasers in this. The big thing is treble, and being able to have that percussive element heard. So, the obvious thing is the wah pedal, right? So
on the floor are 2 jam pedals wackos. I'll try and remember to do a detail.
Yeah.
There are people who say, God, I wish I could see your foot doing what it's doing, but you can hear what it's doing.
Yeah.
When it gets trebly, he's pushing his foot forward. When it gets dark, he's pulling it back.
Yeah. We'll have to have Fernando's feet as opposed to Noel's knobs. But when we're talking about the guitar being a percussion instrument,
Liam's lever. Sorry, it took me a minute.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the guitar being a percussion instrument, and like with the wire off, and I'm using the dynamics of the right hand to give it that feel. But with the wah pedal, it's the filter. And it's why, especially in funk music, it's everywhere. So while the hand is doing a 16th note, the foot is doing a quarter note.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the filter is happening.
Yeah.
You get
To accentuate.
Exactly.
That's I don't want to say cheesy because it's been, I am going to say cheesy. That's the slightly cheesy side of wah, and it's what everyone thinks a wah is in funk guitar. And for short, we've heard it a million times. I want to mention the wah in one other context. Now, delay is not an effect you would necessarily associate with funk guitar because it's percussive. The last thing you want is loads of repeats. The one place you will hear it, so I'm going to incorporate the wah-wah pedal and the delay here.
Nice, very
Got
nice.
the Belle Epoch Deluxe there, and on the floor, underneath my funky shoes, is a pedal that just controls the delay level. So if I play with this pedal back, you won't hear any delay, and as I rock it forward, it'll turn the delay level up. And if you do listen to the beginning of The Payback by James Brown, there's no delay on it, but you can see how it evolved into this. And for this, listen to Wah Wah Watson.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
this is the one place you might hear some sustained chords in funk. God, am I going to have to stand up? So you'd go. So you're using the wah and the delay in combination to get that. And then the other thing to do, which is quite nice, if there's a quiet bit in the song and a gap to be filled, is where you do the Wah Wah Watson thing and you go. Now, it might be that you want a longer delay and more feedback, but you'll hear that over loads and loads as funk then becomes other genres, soul and neo-soul, and certainly some of the 90s stuff with bands like the Brand New Heavies, Incognito.
Yeah.
You'll hear that kind of guitar all over that.
It's that Brand New Heavies riff, yeah.
Yeah. So that's my rallying cry for the delay pedal. Not widely used in traditional 60s style funk, but can be very effective as used in conjunction with the wah wah.
Yeah. And so then we get into something like an Autowah, which is triggered off the envelope of the note.
Just to confirm, Dan's not operating anything with his foot there. It's all happening in the Digitech synth wah.
Yeah, and that's just a fun way to colour those single notes.
And also, if you're rubbish at doing it with your foot, which so many of us are.
Yeah. I think a big one for me, though, is phases in funk. And also, it comes back to that idea of thinning out the sound. All right, so... Again,
go listen to Flashlight by Parliament Funkadelic right now.
Yeah.
You'll hear
there
a
you
phaser.
Go. So this is a first issue small stone phaser from Electro Harmonics. Not necessarily the perfect phaser for this. I'd probably have an old MP1, which is...
Not there.
Not there, no. It's across the road.
Shaped like... one of those things that has a thing on it to go from a low level to a high level, like a ramp, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like a wedge.
It looks like an airplane wheel wedge.
It's Buck Rogers cheese is what it is. Isn't it? It's a wedge of cheese from the 25th century.
Yeah. I love the fidelity of that. But, when this is kicking off, people are grabbing anything that was coming out. And this is, small standards. It's really fantastic phaser. But you'll hear, as it cycles through its modulation, it thins the sound out and just gives you a bit more of a piercing note. So...
I did just turn him up, sorry.
So yeah.
So Noel's knobs will now have changed. The volume knob has gone up by about 1.
So, one of the issues with the older effects is, and especially with phaser, it does, if you put that on the scope, you probably see that the signals are actually unity, but because of the nature of what's happening with the phase of the signal, it feels quieter. But you hear that treble in the phase.
On the aforementioned Flashlight, seriously, stick it on and do the bridge pickup. It is so unbelievably trebly. Yeah, and maybe with a bit more of a hollow nature in it. Anyway, just to say that there's just a ton of treble, and like Dan said, what's happening in the phase is really accentuating that top end in a big way.
Yeah, and from there we get on to EQ, because one of the things that's really important in funk is mids, or the lack of them. Certainly as we get out of the 60s into the 70s.
Yeah, because to begin with, it was a pretty raucous,
absolutely
full-on vintage guitar sound,
absolutely,
which was full of mid-range.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think so. What happened as we get into the 70s, mid 70s, moving forward closer to disco and that sort of thing, we have synthesizers.
I feel a guitar change coming on, Dan.
Very good. So we have synthesizers, and they're taking up even more space sonically, and that idea of being able to shape, because it's so important working out with such dense music where the guitar is sitting, right? So the other thing that's really important to talk about is EQ and compression, actually. So this is the Zenith from Hampstead. It's a joint EQ and a compressor. And I use this to take out the mids,
yeah,
accentuate the top end, and then also compress a bit. So
because the effect of compression itself can do all of that anyway, can't it?
Absolutely.
Even without any EQ, it can really accentuate top end.
Yeah.
Just want to reiterate before we go too deep into the pedals, you don't need any of this stuff. If you just want to go out and play classic funk, guitar, amp, cable, reverb, happy days.
Yeah.
But seeing as we're moving on, let's move on.
Yeah. So again, if I get that last sound, and I just turn the EQ on to take a bit of those mids out.
Stick the small stone on.
There you go.
That's more of what I was hearing in the aforementioned flashlight.
Yeah. So now if I compress that as well. So it's kind of, you're getting that, those nasty frequencies, no, nasty is wrong. The frequencies that we absolutely love, but might cause an issue in a really dense mix when all you really want is the scratch.
Just play that again. I'll switch the pedal while Dan is playing so you can hear it back to back. So it's one switch, then the next.
Yes.
One switch and then again, yeah?
Yep.
So just play anything consistently and we'll... Quite subtle. I think what's actually happening there is the guitar pedal on the pedal board is sort of doing the job of what was going to be happening in the recording chain.
Right.
So maybe as time went on, guitar players used more compressors and stuff, but I think what we're actually trying to do in this context is get closer to that recorded sound that we're more... Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with something like this, we're talking about, we're just, discussing these absolute classic tracks, and the reason that a lot of us are drawn to that funk thing, and what was happening in the studio is what, it's like, okay, we can hear that things are limiting a little bit, we can hear that top end, and we're trying to replicate that live, which is what something like that's perfect for.
I'll talk a little bit about compression to sort of pick up from what he's talking about there. I'm not a fan of front-end compressors, so classic things like the MXR Dynacomp, the Ross 2-knob compressor, where it takes away all of the front end of the note. I've never been a huge fan of using those because where dynamics and pick attack and intention and all of that kind of thing is so important, to me that smooths that stuff out. It is a sound and it's a classic sound. So I've opted for a different take on compression, which comes at the end of the board that I've got set up here. And this is based more on a classic studio compressor. So it's an optical compressor, I think. Based more on something a little bit in the Teletronics LA2A
world,
which you'll see in studios everywhere, big grey box. And this is quite interesting in a couple of ways. So first of all, you can use it to squash.
Yes.
Here we go. I'll stick on the middle position for a minute before we get into the 2 and 4. So you absolutely can use it to do the squash thing and get that sort of approach. And to be fair, I prefer that
Sure.
than the Dynacomp type thing. However, the other thing that this does really nicely is if you get rid of some of that front end compression and boost it, it works brilliantly well as a boost. And in that context, if you do have something like a deluxe reverb or something less insane than this, sorry, by insane I don't mean insane, I mean very high headroom. So if you have a smaller amp, it will push it beautifully into overdrive.
Yeah.
So I like that, and for me that feels a little bit more like a recorded experience of a guitar sound.
Yeah.
Just finally on that, we are taking a DI of this signal. So in the next example, what you're going to hear, I'll play something and I'll try and play something consistent. You'll hear me play something. I'll then put on the compressor.
Mm-hmm.
I will then add the DI sound, and whatever happens on screen will explain what's going on.
Okay.
So to explain the DI, we're going into the Bassman. No, sorry, we're going into the reverb, coming out of the reverb, split into the Bassman.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of the split is hitting a Roger Mayer RM58 limiter, which is on top of our recording console there. I'll try and do, or our desk anyway, I'll try and do a detail of that. That is being recorded direct to the mixing desk.
Right.
And we know this, well, starting with the Beatles, and then after the Beatles, Nile Rodgers.
Yeah.
And what you'll hear is the sound of a mic guitar amp. You'll hear a direct signal, and then you'll hear the two mixed. And it's quite interesting. I hope it's going to be quite interesting.
We'll see.
The on screen will explain.
Nice.
300,000 people all over YouTube going, please stop. So hopefully that will have explained that. On-screen graphics will have explained direct sound, amp sound. Really important part of funk guitar as time goes on. Read the story. I don't know if it's Good Times or the other famous Chic song, which is how they did it, that one. So Good Times is the E minor 7.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is
The Chic. The Freak.
The Freak, yeah. And that's, I think that's the one where it's half
direct, half
direct. Yeah. Google it. But an important, and what that does, it's an extension of, Dan was talking earlier about EQ and it being so critically important in those high frequencies. What you get with the direct sound, what I hope you've got with the direct sound, is more of that percussive, almost acoustic like plink.
Yeah.
Plink is the best way I can describe it. And that is where we start coming into the more modern era. Anyway.
Yeah. And the last effect is, if you ever listen to like Isley Brothers or Wild Cherry, whenever the rare occasion happens that a guitarist gets to take a solo, it's like, he's been sat with horns in his ears all night. He needs to step forward and release the Kraken. So a lot of times they use like big fuzzes and really out there sounds, to take a solo.
The fuzz. I mean, think about Ernie Isley.
Yeah, totally.
And Eddie Hazel. Funkadelic. And
it's a really big thing.
Phaser and vibe, or fuzz and phaser, or fuzz and vibe.
Yeah,
it was the sound, wasn't
definitely.
it? So you got a fuzz? Have you got?
Yeah,
a fuzz?
well, I've got a fuzzy type thing. I've got the MXR Blue Box.
I never knew that was a fuzz.
It's like a fuzz, but with 2 octaves below, mixed in.
Oh wow, okay.
Which
how did I not know that?
Which struggles to track.
Yeah,
and it just sounds great.
You can basically only use it on these 3 strings above the 12th fret.
Because you're hearing that octave, 2 octaves below.
Play some lead up there. It's starting to sound like one of Bootsy's bass lines.
But, there are loads of examples of guitar solos with that really wild, fuzzy type thing going onto it now. Blue Box is a lot of fun.
I started with a fuzz on my board, but I decided I didn't like it. It was too scratchy and thin through this particular amp. So I changed it for the Warthog, which is a distortion that can go into fuzzy-like territories. And if fuzz is too much for you, then maybe a distortion that veers into thicker, fuller, fuzzy thing could be useful. And I've also put a Univibe type pedal on. This is the Jam Pedals Retrovibe. So just purely personally, I'm not a big fan of traditional phasers and flangers. I just never really played them. I am a massive fan of Univibes. And it is an 8-stage phaser, right? 8-stage phaser?
4-stage phaser.
4-stage phaser, arranged in a slightly different way. And it's the classic, well, it's this sound. You know it. Jimi Hendrix, Robin Trower, but it does actually give quite a phasey character when you use it with a heavy overdrive. So the heavy overdrive is the Warthog, and it is a little bit fuzzy, I guess. So.
Play something over this.
Now, you might think that doesn't sound very funky. Listen to some of Eddie Hazel's
Yeah, all right.
complete wig outs, and you'll hear something in that vein.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would always go to sort of put some sense on that. I'm not sure that for my taste personally anyway, the subtle, nice, rounded, beautiful overdrive has much place.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Where it might in blues or soul or whatever, but in funk I want big, distorted,
Raucousness.
fuzzy raucousness.
Yeah, totally.
To bring it. Cool, man.
Awesome.
That was interesting.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was more interesting than I thought it was going to be. I'm just going to wonder if we missed any important effects. Filters. Didn't really get into other kinds of filters, like the Neutron and all that, which again is hugely important.
Yeah, so that the Neutron, which is the Musitronics Neutron, was a massive moment. I think the wire is on. So the Neutron, a massive moment in funk. It was used a lot by bass players
Bass and synth.
and synth and keys and stuff.
So if you do need to cover some of that ground, it could be... I did actually, before we started the show, I messed around with this a little bit. The Source Audio Spectrum Intelligent Filter, which is completely brilliant and does all those sounds in a compact package. It comes unreservedly recommended. But to be honest, sort of staying semi-real about it, it's too complicated for me. I can't get my head around it. So
Sure.
I just stick with what I know,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been using the
what I
old
half know.
I've been using the old Digitech synthwire for years, and it's got all those synthy, filtery sounds in it, and it's just it's really fun. But I think on guitar, those moments are they're not as prevalent as you might think, but certainly on bass and keys, they're everywhere. Yeah. The most important thing with those filters is, however you're doing it, it's just accentuating that top end.
Yeah. To the point where it might seem wrong to you in isolation, but as he said, getting out above that whole mix thing, hugely important. And don't be afraid of reverb. We've both been soaked in reverb today.
It's a beautiful thing.
Love it. Swim in it. Okay, so we'll finish off then by summarising. You heard most of them actually during the course of the video, but a couple of ideas. If you're in a 2-guitar band, perhaps the way to approach this. What you hear hopefully from Dan is a very trebly sound. What you'll hear from me is a more mid-focused kind of sound.
Sure.
Give me a clue on key as well, mate.
Okay, in A.
Go for it. Set me up. As you can see, it gets the busier you both play, the harder it gets, and maybe let's try and leave some space.
Yep.
We'll both try and leave some space and try and set up a call and response kind of deal.
Yeah.
So
great.
maybe slightly slower tempo.
Okay.
stay out of each other's way,
Yeah.
tonally.
And just listen.
Listen
Do,
to the
do,
flower people. Yeah, cool. Other ideas? I think we sort of covered them through the show, really.
Yeah.
Stay out of each other's way. Different tones. One very bright, one more middle focused. And think about call and response. And I think you can do a lot with that.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing how many hours can fly by.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And even if you need to print out a giant one and put it on your pedal board, never forget the one.
Yeah.
Because it's all about the one.
All about the one. As Bootsy says.
As Bootsy and George Clinton will keep telling you if you listen to any of their music.
It's all about the one.
Gotta get on the one. Yeah.
There we go.
Good. Oh, well, that was fun.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
Really fun. It's nice to play. That's the closest I've come to a gig in a long time.
They've all gone home, mate.
That's about right.
Do you only take that?
I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And of course, a massive thank you to anyone that's gone to thatpedalshowstore.com and grabbed some merch. We've got pedals and strings and t-shirts and hats and loads of stuff. It's the main way we fund the show. So if that's you and you've gone there and bought stuff, thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it.
Indeed we do. One other way is patreon.com. Check out patreon.com/thatpedalshow. You can support us there as well. Helps us keep this whole thing on the road. We also do weekly podcasts and monthly giveaways for our patrons on Patreon. And finally, just to say, please click the description down and check out some of the retail links that you'll see below for Anderton's Music of Guildford, for that pedal shop in the USA, and also Pedal Empire of Brisbane, Queensland, all ways in which we help fund the show.
Yes, indeed. Thanks so much. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you on Monday for viewers, comments and questions. But till then, be good. See you soon.
And get funky.
Oh, yeah.
See ya.
Bye.